The turn of the 21st century was supposed to represent Zimbabwe with a new trajectory of fortunes. The country took bold steps to redefine its ethos, reclaim its sovereignty, and to bolster self-determination for prosperity and economic development. Zimbabwe's land reform program received rave reviews among fellow African countries, but the Western world was enraged, and in retaliation imposed sanctions to punish the Republic for taking back its wealth and redistributing it to the masses. The United States of America took the lead and imposed the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, ZIDERA, in 2001, and went on to further impose targeted sanctions in 2003. In 2002, the European Union followed suit and imposed targeted restrictive measures as well as preconditions for their removal. As if to add insult to injury, the United States in 2018 renewed ZIDERA, claiming that Zimbabwe needed to restore democracy or face more punitive sanctions.
My basic understanding of sanctions is basically trading restrictions, which are sort of like given to a country. The country is isolated. It does not have any trading partners outside its boundaries.
Sanctions, put in their context, are embargoes, rather prescriptive embargoes that deter, that bar, that prohibit certain facets of the international trade to be conducted between or among countries or against a country with a sole intention of coercing, arm twisting that particular party or country to behave in a certain manner, to concede to a certain set of demands, to bend on a certain position of principle or on a value principle. That's what sanctions are.
Taking it from a realistic point of view, states in the international system, they are egocentric. And all what they need, is advance their personal interest. That is the egocentric part. So it is with no doubt that is the sanction even up to this day, it is still being used, in coupling with the idealistic approach now. The modern approach is like the biological warfare, but this still the sanction part, it is with America being the global headmaster, the global evil headmaster. They will simply continue in their perpetual use of sanctions. In trying to cripple the economies of Zimbabwe. You could refer to the document that was published by Christopher Dale, who happens to be a diplomatic official in America. In his publications, he actually stated that the major aim of the economic sanctions imposed on illegal economic sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe was to make the Zimbabwe economic scream. So in a way, these economic sanctions that have been imposed on Zimbabwe, their prime objective, their prime target was to make the economy of Zimbabwe scream, was to contain the activity and the behavior of Zimbabwe as a state in the international system.
Fast forward to 2019. The government launched an anti-sanctions campaign, which received great backing from SADC countries and was greatly participated by all Zimbabweans from all provinces of the country.
Why now? It is not we are starting now. This process has been there. Zimbabwe has tried for quite a number of years. SADC has also been trying to work together with Zimbabwe for a number of years, but we are not seeing results. So what is happening now is to emphasize that indeed allows Zimbabweans to enjoy their political independence. They can only enjoy their political independence if the political independence is accompanied by socio-economic development.
The effects of sanctions on Zimbabwe have been quite broad. What made them broad was and is the intensity of the sanctions. What makes them broad is also the time that has lapsed since the imposition of sanctions. So the time variable has also caused deeper harm, more chronic affliction to Zimbabweans.
The 25th of October culminated in an anti-sanction march, which received great backing from the Zimbabweans from all provinces. SADC countries also took part in the Solidarity March in various activities. This was meant to pressure the West, particularly United States and the European Union, into lifting the sanctions that had been imposed on Zimbabwe for nearly 2 decades and had been recently renewed. The meaning of sanctions can be best explained by the victims, because the victims and the imposers have different views and experiences of the sanctions.
So what it does is basically it restricts foreign trade as far as that country is concerned, and you don't get any assistance from people who provide loans for you guys for the country to move forward. And it's basically it's an embargo which is imposed on the country to make sure that it doesn't trade outside its boundaries.
With regard to the sanctions that are taken to Zimbabwe, we cannot classify them as just sanctions, because Zimbabwe as a country never violated, it has never been categorized or been placed to a condition or a position where it violated any other country's right for it to be placed under economic sanctions. The sanctions that we are talking of Zimbabwe, they are illegal sanctions, and in retrospect, you can define those illegal sanctions as an uncouth standpoint by the Americans and its European allies to put Zimbabwe into an unfavorable condition, to put Zimbabwe into a state where it can fail to provide for its people. So generally, to me, the definition of sanctions, especially legal sanctions that has been imposed to Zimbabwe, are a sacrificial standpoint by the Americans to actually put the life of the people of Zimbabwe, the life of the government of Zimbabwe, the life of the leadership of Zimbabwe into a crisis position where it cannot fend for its people, where the government cannot be in a position to provide for its people.
The basic understanding for sanctions are punitive measures which were given to Zimbabwe by America and the EU countries to punish us because of the land reform which took place in 1999.
Usually these punitive measures are taken to force another state to comply to the dictates of the country that is actually putting those sanctions. So in the case of Zimbabwe, we know that the Americans and part of the Western world, the Europeans, they have put punitive measures on Zimbabwe. And mainly this was done when we had the agrarian reform or the land reform program, which didn't go down well with the Western world. So they had to put economic sanctions on Zimbabwe so that we reverse the land reform program that we had embarked on.
Sanctions have left a dark cloud on Zimbabwe's socio-economic and political trajectory. It has left many citizens under the yoke of hardships and poverty. Informal traders have to continually adapt to the ever-changing socio-economic conditions in the country.
Masanction akarabiswa tesitasimuko tomabasa maindustry esanenga wow dzimwe nyika dzine dzakufumuko kuya kuzoitawo mabasa muno saka masanction anofanira kubviswa. Toshamiswa nevamwe vanoti dearegera akadaro ayo vanhu ivo vakapusa ivo havazizwa kuita nokuda kuti ukabvisirwa masanction nyika yese inenge yasimuka chetakuita zvatinoda nyikawo dzakutipawo zvakawandawo then mabusiness investors anonyatsokutouya muno akasununguka but Zimbabwe nenyika yakasununguka chose yekuti zvese nekuda zvatiri kuita zviri kutondipa mari chaizvo zvakanaka haufaniri kungochema kuti zvinhu zvakaoma muZimbabwe zvinhu zvakaoma muzimbabwe chese changokuoma ungoti purezidendi azodaiwo unochida kuti purezidendi auya akuitire chi ungoti purezidendi changokuomera nhango dei wacho wamune kuti dei angauya nhango dei aripo unongoramba uchingoita izvozvo zvauri kungoita izvozvo hapana chinochida saka unofanira kuti zvinhu zvakaoma uchitodi uine chimwe chauri kuita mukati meupenyu vanongoti zvinhu zvakaoma iwe wakagara kumba zvinhu zviri kuzooma purezidendi azodai aita sei uda kuti purezidendi akuitire chi zvinhu zvinotofanira tinofanira kuti zvakaoma asi uine chinhu chauri kuitawo mukati meupenyu tezvozvizvi ndikutoita zvandiri kuita izvi ndinochemawo hangu asi handizonyanyi kuchema seumwe akangogara ari kumba izvi zvinotondipa mari yekutoriritira mhuri vana kuchikoro vari kutoenda kuchikoro nezvozvizvi.
Businesses, which is supposed to be the heart and soul of Zimbabwe's economic development, have become a pale shadow of themselves. This is because they have been shut down. The majority are crawling because they cannot access credit facilities that are affordable. This can be evidenced by the Standard Chartered Bank, which was slapped with punitive fines because it was engaging with Zimbabwe's banks and institutions. This has left and exposed Zimbabwe as a pariah state.
The sanctions have affected my business in a big way by sourcing foreign currency. Right now, most of our raw material, we import them from China and South Africa. We don't have enough foreign currency for us to import the raw materials to sustain our business, for us to manufacture the detergents. A very good example, toilet cleaners, hard surface cleaner. Some of the ingredients that we need from China are slace, sulfonic acid, and all those things are only manufactured by Chinese and South Africans. So at the moment we are being affected because we don't have foreign currency to import those raw materials. And secondly, whenever we are doing our payments, in some instances where our money will end up being held by the Central Reserves in America, and at the end of the day we end up being crippled on our operations.
The sanctions that have been put by the Western world, they have had devastating effects on my personal business. I'm into mining, and as you know, mining requires a lot of capital injection, and most of this capital usually comes from financial institutions and FDIs. So most institutions that are financial institutions that are dealing with Zimbabwe are also put on the radar by the countries that are putting sanctions on Zimbabwe. That if they deal with Zimbabwe, they also are put on the sanctions list. So the downward effect of that is that we haven't had foreign direct investment, and financial institutions are reluctant also to lend money to businesses that are in this country. So this has had a negative impact on the ability of our businesses to grow, and for the mining sector, especially on my personal capacity, to have growth in the mines that this government has enabled us to own. So sanctions are really a bad way of interacting with an independent state. So it compromises on the sovereignty of a state to govern itself, and we are now forced to go back to the West to ask them to remove those sanctions because we cannot access funding from financial institutions that are controlled by the Western world.
When you impose sanctions against an outfit that holds a strategic nerve center of industry, that literally causes collapse to the entirety of the auxiliary industries that feed into it. Which ones do you count as having imposed sanctions on? Do you count just that one? What of the rest that you have affected? What of the lives that you've affected? What of the children and women you've affected? What of the health systems that you've collapsed? What of the social services, social amenities, facilities that you have collapsed within that? Who will account for that? And at what point do you close the tap?
Zimbabwe has been affected by sanctions in many ways. Our company is basically a transport company which relies on imports as far as its spare parts are concerned. We also rely on imports as far as tires are concerned. Because of sanctions, we are restricted and there's a limitation in terms of availability of those spare parts. And you will find we've got difficulties in making sure that we maintain our fleet so that it is on the road always because of these sanctions. It has been tough. All we have to do is to persevere and make sure that we create in-house solutions so that we survive and pass these sanctions.
Meanwhile, the government of Zimbabwe stands unshaken in leading the charge against sanctions, and it will continue until sanctions have been lifted.
I think the initiative by SADC to take head on the Western world with regards to sanctions on Zimbabwe is a very positive pan-African move that was long overdue. And we urge the leadership of SADC to continue to fight on these sanctions until Zimbabwe has been removed from the sanctions list and it can trade freely with any country that it wishes to trade with and any company that it wishes to engage in business with. So SADC has taken a good lead as an organ that represents, SADC countries, and we applaud the leadership of SADC, and we urge them not to tire until these sanctions have been removed.
I think SADC, they did a very good thing, especially the president of Tanzania, President Magufuli, who is the chairperson of SADC, who actually initiated this campaign for anti-sanction on Zimbabwe. SADC we are brothers, and the initiative that they are taking is a very good initiative, so that we can send a signal to those people who have given us sanctions, that we as SADC, we as Southern African developing countries, we are united, and we want these animal code sanctions to go like yesterday.
The malicious allegations of human rights by the West have been promoted by elements in the Zimbabwean population. This is because we can actually see some political parties going abroad in support of the sanctions on Zimbabwe.
It's very sad, and I'm not going to hide that, because you see that elsewhere, people in other parts of the world, they put national interest first. You don't see citizens criticizing their government without any good reason. Criticism is okay, but let your criticism be constructive. Criticize based on facts, but also criticize also providing solutions, and also be part of that process, the solution process. So if you read on the social media, it is just criticism, but the criticism also are just a repetition of what is someone saying that sanctions are targeted. You don't see people recognizing that there are efforts which are going on to ensure that indeed Zimbabwe comes back. Comes back means to be on track in terms of socio-economic development. So I cannot emphasize more that Zimbabweans should also understand that they have a responsibility of building their country, but also building national unity.
The long-running argument that sanctions are targeted has been long disputed by SADC because their effects have far-reaching and wide-ranging impacts on the livelihoods of the people. Sanctions have lowered investor confidence in Zimbabwe, which has adversely affected the foreign direct investment.
I have been listening following on social media that these sanctions are targeted to individuals. You may take it that way, but once a country is in a sanction, even if, I'll go back to the issue of being targeted, even if they are targeted, you lose investors' confidence because the country is on sanction. You lose also, it's a perception which is there that a country is in sanction, so who is willing to go and partner with Zimbabwe, a country which is under sanction? So that has to be understood, that we need investors' confidence. But again, it's not true that these sanctions are targeted to individuals. You have, Zimbabwe is an agrarian economy. Zimbabwe depends on agriculture, but one of its bank, a development bank, is under sanction. So if a bank is under sanction, what do you expect? But again, even the financial institutions, they are also sanctioned in a manner that if you do business with Zimbabwe, you are also going to be penalized. We saw that it happened with Standard Bank in the United States. So the implications, the sanctions have far implications, which one may not see them, but indeed. And at the end of the day, it's not what they are saying that the person who is suffering is the person who is targeted. No, it's an ordinary citizen, an ordinary Zimbabwe. And they have been called that Zimbabwe has to undergo or to put in place economic reform program. That is in place. But you cannot align economic reform program with political and security reforms, because these are reforms, and the reforms, they take long. So if you want freedom of speech as a bill to be enacted, so okay, fine, and you see that the process is ongoing, the government is willing, is doing that. Why now don't you allow the socio-economic reforms also to take place by supporting those economic reforms?
Anti-sanction campaigns are bound to continue until sanctions have been lifted from Zimbabwe. It is time for Zimbabwe to reclaim its glory amongst nations. However, there is need for unity of purpose within the body politic of Zimbabwe.
What I can add the fellow business people to do, especially when it comes to sanctions, we must unite as a family, because we are a family as business people. It doesn't matter whether you are manufacturing, whether you are a commodity broker, it doesn't matter where you are coming from. As long as you are a business person, you must unite. And we must try by all means to avoid saying negative things about our country out there. When you go out there, you must try by all means to say positive things. Because at the end of the day, if you say negative things, we will chase away the investors to come and invest in our country. Right now, there are so many incidents right now whereby some business people, they are decampaigning our government out there. But they are decampaigning our government out there instead of them to encourage investors to come to Zimbabwe, since the president said Zimbabwe is open for business. Sure, Zimbabwe is open for business, but it's very unfortunate that our government at the moment, they are on a corner. They are on a corner because we can't even raise foreign currency, enough foreign currency to run the institutions, the government institutions. A very good example like Zinara, to rehabilitate the roads, to build roads and so forth.
I think fellow business people in Zimbabwe, they have to work together. If we look at the time that Ian Smith government was under sanctions, companies came together, government brought in policies that supported industry and businesses. So I urge fellow business people to come together, to work harder, and for government also to put policies that support business, understanding that we are operating under sanctions, so that we solve our own problems. My grandfather always told me that, if you solve your own problems, you become your own master. So if we solve our own problems as Zimbabweans, we become masters of our destiny as a country. So I urge fellow Zimbabweans, despite our political differences, sanctions must go. Sanctions have no place in this country. Sanctions are illegal, and they must be dealt with as illegal sanctions. And those that are imposing these sanctions must be held accountable for the illegal imposition that they have done on this country, because they have caused mass destruction of people's lives, and there is reparations that has to happen because of the sanctions that they've imposed on this country.
Good initiative, and I'm just hoping their voice is going to be heard worldwide. It's a very good initiative. There's no reason why our country must be under sanctions. We don't deserve it at all. What I can urge on fellow business people is we need to persevere. Let's not fold our arms. We need to come up with solutions in our solutions until these sanctions are busted, so that there's continuity. And look, eventually this is going to be lifted, I believe. But we need to persevere and soldier on and move on with our operations.
The initiative by SADC to support Zimbabwe is proof enough that SADC supports and recognizes the efforts of Zimbabwe to turn a page on the socio-economic and political trajectory. Zimbabwe will continue to stand united and fight the sanctions until they have been lifted.